We're this supposed to be fiercely independent, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all of that. But I'm like, I appreciate a physical therapist, right? Because they're working to get to those knots that I can't get to, and they understand the muscles exactly right, so they can work on that. So to have a coach that's helping out on the mental side of things, to me only makes sense. And especially in today's world that is so complex and it's not slowing down.
Okay, folks, here we go. This is MK Palmore, CEO of Apogee Global RMS, and welcome to this episode of Amplify, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. I'm here today with Ken Woodward. Ken and I had the opportunity to meet several weeks ago through a networking contact, actually a colleague of mine here at Apogee. Had a good conversation about what Ken is doing in the industry. He's currently a coach, speaker, and also a podcaster. He has a podcast on his own, which we'll get to in due course here to amplify that and make sure that you guys know how to find him in his own podcasting realm. But Ken is engaged in some pretty interesting work. So for my listeners, you guys will know that I spent a career in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So interviewing was a skill that I developed, and I'd like to think somewhat perfected over time. I had quite a bit of success in conducting interviews with people and soliciting quite frankly, confessions in lots of different realms. But Ken is engaged in the study of curating questions, which I think is just a fascinating sort of flip on the whole idea of extracting information and getting information and how best to pose questions seemed to me to be a super, super interesting way to engage in this topic. Ken has a career in public service. Currently, he's out again coaching and doing some public speaking and running his own podcast. But Ken, welcome to the studio. It's really great to have you in here.
Thank you, MK. I'm looking forward to it. I love all that you're doing through Apogee Global. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, Ken, you're turning what I would call sort of the interview sort of standard on its head by approaching it from a bit of a different angle. How'd you even get interested in this idea of question curation or formulating questions? How'd that start for you?
It really was scratching my own itch. So I had heard all these successful people say some variation of change your questions, change your life. And I'm like, all right, cool. What are those special questions that I actually need to be using such that I can go change my life? And there wasn't like one master source. There might be a couple in a book, or somebody may say a powerful or impactful question on a podcast. So in 2018, I started the Curated Questions website just as a repository for me to be able to collect these different questions. And then it just became that. As I would read or hear something on a podcast, then I would dump it in there, fully attributional for whoever I got the question from or whoever was the original source. And that has helped me, and living with these questions and starting in that conversation. And then where I'm at with the podcast is that's just the extension or kind of the evolution of having these conversations about questions and building up kind of an ecosystem of using or talking about questions and really identifying it as a skill that's something that can be improved, and then just kind of sharing that gospel of just use more questions.
Yeah. So to what end? Talk a little bit more about how you scratch that itch. It's curating questions because you expect a deeper and more rich response if there's more thought put into the question.
Yes. So from a personal standpoint, questions did save my life. There was actually a very dark period that I had gone through, and the question of what laughter will I miss helped me come out of a dark spot. The questions that I have used at various points in my life to make decisions helped me better understand. Questions help me to understand others more because, for instance, in 2018 or at the end of 2017, going into 2018, doing a year-end kind of a analysis, I realized that I was just going home to work all the time. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to better understand the world around me. So I said, all right, great. 2018 is going to be my hashtag year of connections. And that was going out and having intentional conversations. So I would expend resources, time, money, whatever, to have intentional conversations with people that were either kind of relationships that just were not as strong or new relationships. For instance, we live in America, and I didn't know anyone personally that had been incarcerated. And it's like, oh, pat yourself on the back. Good boy, because you're surrounding yourself with the right people. Well, the reality is there's a lot of incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people. And to not have any insight into what that is like for the individuals or the families and such. So I spoke with a couple of people who had been incarcerated and met up with them. And it was following these questions that I better understood the world around me, what their life was like, the implications of the system that's in place. So it's just giving me greater insight into knowing people. And then I've been able to carry that into the workplace and with coaching and the rest, just being able to engage and really dig in to the lived experience of others.
So we'll likely spend the vast majority of our conversation diving deeply on what you just described in terms of your use of this process to get to understand people better, which I think is the fantastic reason to explore all of this. But I'm also interested in, have you used this sort of position of inquiry to learn more, just basically, whether it be science, whether it be just sort of things about nature? Like, does that same curation of questions drive your interest across the board? Or is it genuinely centered around getting to know people and their stories better?
It has expanded. Because what I've found is the beautiful thing about curiosity is it has a lot of tendrils. Because now, when I go out to the built environment, I was just in Chicago, and understanding the architecture there it's stunning. And so that drove a whole bunch of curiosity about why. Why is there so much architecture in Chicago? Why is it this high point? And then you start to dig into some of the facts about why that was intentional and some of the different architects that were there and then where they've other built, or the trees that locally anyway. It's given me an interest more on there. And so then I start to go do research. So that's what I found is that once you start down this path of curiosity, it just opens up the world.
So when we take that level of curiosity and we apply it to, as I indicated a couple of seconds ago, introspection and or introduction, learning about people, what have you learned in that process, generally speaking, about sort of asking better questions of people?
To be brave and courageous, let silence happen, and just leave your judgments at the door. Because another project that I did, which we may touch more on, was doing a walk through DC. It was for social justice post the killing of George Floyd. I walked 2,085 miles through every street and alley in DC, and that was a listening tour. I've grown and learned all of these things throughout my life. I'm now 55, and I learned the history of America through the school system and the like. And then getting out and hearing stories that maybe my school books didn't include all the details. That insight allowed me to deeply listen and learn and set aside or allow my understanding of the world to be challenged and some of the myths to be pulled down, which, for the record, is exceedingly painful, but necessary. And I'm glad that I'm on this side of that.
So my listeners won't be able to see this unless you're watching the YouTube version of this, but I see two maps of Washington, D.C. behind you there. I know that, and I'm not sure if we've discussed it, but I am a Washingtonian born and raised in the southeast section of the city, Anacostia, to be exact. Born and raised there, grew up and loved the entirety of my youth in Washington, D.C. What did you learn about the city that you can, in a truncated fashion, tell us that impressed you?
There is beauty everywhere. The wealthy neighborhoods may have more money to decorate their homes, but the beauty is everywhere. And folks will use the resources to make their homes home. And there is beauty within each of the communities. And then whether it's the architecture, but also just the people. I had so much fun walking some of the alleys because the alleys are kind of an extension of the home, especially in the cities, where being able to connect with people like Raymond Coates. I was walking down his alley. He invited me into his backyard at 1:00. I got up at 6:45 that evening, and we spent the entire time nonstop talking. That was a beautiful moment, and I never would have met him or had that connection apart from walking through his alley.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned alleys because I remember as a child growing up in DC, the neighborhood, we actually spent most of the time in the alley in between the rows of houses because that's where we could play without the interruption of cars and things like that. So
Absolutely.
even in you mentioning it now is bringing back some memories of my youth, great memories too, just about how the city is set up and how, quite frankly, if I'm being honest, there are some alleys that are fine to walk down. There are some that maybe are not.
Sure.
So hopefully you didn't have any challenging experiences. But I absolutely love growing up in Washington, D.C. And I tell people all the time that it's probably one of the things that, from a prideful standpoint that I carry with me throughout life. And it's interesting because born and raised in Washington, D.C., but after college, the Marines sent me to California. And I've been willingly trapped in California for probably 35, close to 40 years now. But again, fond memories of growing up there in the city. Let's shift gears a little bit. Take this proposition of curating questions and this idea of really being curious about people and apply it to the coaching world. How have you seen that amplify your coaching capabilities? And was it the questions that brought you to coaching or coaching that brought you to the question?
Questions brought me to coaching. Definitely. Well, that and just the love of people and how can I serve. Because of the ability to use questions, and I've been using them outside of coaching in various capacities for a long time. And folks had encouraged me. They're like, dang, man, you asked some great questions. They're very insightful questions. And this is kind of even before all of this journey had started. So there was already a love of questions, and now it became focusing on them because it's kind of one of those things where we often don't realize how many questions we do or don't ask. We know that kids ask a ton of them. We know as we get older, we ask less of them. And then it becomes just an unseen part of who we are. And part of what I'm seeking to do is bring that forward, and so that we at least acknowledge it and understand the questions that we're working with. So now in the coaching world, I very much adhere to the finding good methodology, which is let's focus on strengths. Let's find out what you want. Let's find evidence of where you've encountered that before, and then let's amplify that, and then let's start tracking that and finding out how you can encounter more of that as we go forward. Because I'm generally an optimistic kind of a guy, I'd rather focus on the strengths and to be able to use those strengths to be able to achieve whatever outcome clients are looking to achieve.
How would you describe this coaching? Is it life coaching? Is it leadership coaching? What lane are you in, or would you prefer not to be in a lane and think more broadly just about coaching?
At the moment, it's a bit more broad because of the different folks that I'm talking with. There hasn't been, or to date, there hasn't been a hard lockdown on one side or the other.
Any thoughts around, obviously, we do coaching as a part of the business that we do at Apogee. Any thoughts around the environment for things like leadership coaching? And the reason I ask that It's because I find folks very reluctant to identify, one, that they feel like they need coaching for anything. And then secondarily, if you are willing to take the step that, yes, you know what, coaching might be something that I should explore in terms of seeking engagement with a coach, getting over that hurdle, then I think people feel as though that there's so many people out there conducting coaching that it can be tough to find someone that you align with. How do you ensure that you're aligned, that what it is that you're offering is of substance and value to a potential client? Like, how do those conversations go? And I ask that in the context of maybe sometimes you say, well, I'm probably not the right person
Absolutely.
So you get actually to a no sometimes in those conversations. How do you go about that process of making sure that what you offer is aligned to what the client's looking for?
Yeah, I completely agree. Because end state here is that the goal is to help achieve the goal that's desired. So that means that this is not a forever, relationship. I'm good being friends beyond that, whatever. But we're here to achieve a goal that's measurable and very objective. So let's get after that. Then also just alignment wise and style wise, because I want the individual to be successful, apart from coaching, period, I want you to be successful in the things that you're going after. So if that means that I am not the right individual, then fantastic. Let me help you. I will help you find whoever is the right individual, because the primary goal is for you to be successful in the things that you're going after. There's plenty of opportunity. There's plenty of things. I'm confident that my skills will find the right clients. So I'm not concerned about that. I'd rather ensure that you get the help and the skills that you need that connect with who you are as an individual.
Why do you think people are so adverse to the idea of seeking coaches for different aspects of their lives? Or, and first of all, do you agree with that assertion? And then secondarily, why do you think it is?
Absolutely, we're Americans, man. I'm probably talking mostly to Americans here, but if you're not American and you've seen enough movies, you know us. You know how this works. In this example, is that we're supposed to be fiercely independent, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all of that. But I'm like, well, I know athletes need coaches, and
thank you.
I know I appreciate a physical therapist, right? Because they're working to get to those knots that I can't get to, and they understand the muscles exactly right, so they can work on that. So to have a coach that's helping out on the mental side of things, to me, only makes sense. And especially in today's world that is so complex, more complex than ever before, and it's not slowing down. So to be able to have someone that you can talk with that can kind of work on some of those blind spots or help us to kind of work through. I really appreciate Dr. Kelly Starrett from the Ready State. He talks, and he's a physical therapy guy. He's like, you take those mobility tools and you go into the pain cave and you do some work to work those muscles so they function properly. This is kind of what I'm looking at. Let's just go into the pain cave, spend a little bit of time working on that roller ball and such, and work out some of those muscles such that you can get the performance that you're looking for.
How does your so let me back up for a second. Curated, when I hear the term curated questions, I think that one, you've got a question bank somewhere of like just full of questions. First of all, how'd you come up with those questions? Are those self-derived or self-developed? Do you gather them as you sort of go through the process of engaging with people? Like, how's that actually work in terms of formulating these questions? And then do you have them broken up by categories and such? Like, how is it that you organize this information?
Yes. How's that for an answer? All
Yes,
right.
all of
that
the
was easy. Okay. So yes, on the website, I've got different categories I've got leadership, both sides of the table for interviews, and a bunch of different categories. So any question that's on there that has a name tag to it would be from whatever source I got it from. If it doesn't have a name tag to it, then it's one that I generated. And then the source from where I've gotten those has been reading, podcast, books, any source that I can get. And one of the things that I've also been very aware of is that the sources can literally come from anyone, where we often think that, oh, it's only someone that wrote a best-selling book. Not necessarily, because a question can cut across socioeconomic, racial, time, any particular lines, and find value today. And so that's where I've really found because I've got a book that I've been working through that was, it was a Chinese poem of like 1,000 questions written on this wall, like a couple thousand years ago. So I'm working through that. Now, for the record, I'm not judging the efficacy of a 2,000-year-old document, but it's to say, what questions today are we seeing that might be helpful? So that's where the different questions come from. And then within the coaching per se, it is kind of a stair-step process using the Finding Good methodology, where it's first off, what do you want more of? And then we develop through a few steps on there. But there, it's kind of some framework questions, and then it follows into that curiosity of following back on where have you been successful in this before?
Without attribution, I am certain that in this process, you probably have been wowed or blown away by responses sometimes, or how a question can really open up a vault of substantive and deep conversation and information. Is there anything that stands out in your mind, like maybe a particular question that, when asked, ended up giving you a response that, one, you were either not expecting or was just so full that it led to some really, really deep and substantive follow-on conversation?
I've had lots of the substantive and deep conversations, but if a favorite story comes from someone that just encountered the power of the question. So for those folks that get to see this on YouTube, so in the world of whenever I meet someone, I bring my little orange portfolio of business cards. And what I'll do is when I meet someone, I'll fan them out, kind of like just like you would a deck of cards, like a magician. And all these have different questions that are from the website. And so I was at a conference and I'd met an executive and did the same kind of thing. And they drew the question from Jerry Colonna, which it's kind of one of his hallmark questions of, how have you been complicit in creating the circumstances you say you don't want? Super powerful question. Not fully responsible. How have you been complicit?
Right.
And pulling that question apart, it's just a powerful question.
Man,
So
I love that question.
it's stunning.
It gets my mind racing.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. And so this individual, we were standing at this high top table, and they took the card, they looked at it, and they were like, wow, hold on just a second. And then, okay. And then, so they turned the card over, set it on the table, and they're like, all right, let's keep talking. And then a minute later, they said, hold on just a second. They looked back at the card and they sat with it for probably 30 seconds. This is where silence comes in. Let the questions do the work. And they said, seeing this changes everything. And I was like, wow. And so we talked a little bit about what was going on, and then we moved towards wrapping up the conversation. And as I was leaving, they said, for the record, I was going to quit my job until I got this card. That hit me. That was, that was an incredible moment. And so that is an example of when I witnessed the power of intersecting the right question with encountering the right question. And this is where a reason that I love having questions out there on the website, such that you can easily pursue. They're not behind a locked wall or anything, but it's we need different questions at different times, and we may not know what that question is. This one is helpful because you could always refer back to it. But the opportunity to encounter a question that can have a significant impact on us, that is just a remarkable gift. And so I look at this as my opportunity in the work that I'm seeking to do is I want to be a conduit for allowing as much of that to happen as possible. If folks have taken these cards and they're like, hey, used them around the dinner table and such, and they're like, you are selling these, aren't you? And I'm like, no, these are just business cards that, my information's on the backside of them. But it's that laying the groundwork, creating the opportunity such that these questions are readily available. And then you take that and then you start to dig and you come up with your own questions. So that was a time that one always sticks with me.
I love that story. Makes me think, though, that humans generally, and I'm like this as well, the last thing we want to do is figure out the role that we play in where we happen to be in our lives. Like there's always something happening to you, not because of the decisions that you make, right? Or at least that's the mindset. When in fact, one of the most famous and best statements I've ever heard is that, you're exactly in the place that you are because of all of the decisions that you've made up to this point, or something like that, or something akin to it. And it strikes me that, we are ultimately like 100% responsible for the places that we find ourselves in our lives. Why do you think people are so reluctant to understand the role they individually play in, I don't know, just simply accomplishing things or where they may happen to be in their lives? Why do you think there's a reluctance to
that? If I talk for me, it's fear. Because the moment that I have to take full responsibility for where I'm at, that's scary.
It strips away everything, huh?
It really is. But that's also at the moment that you get power as well. And as you become more self-aware, then you understand the strength or the value that you bring to humanity, to your family, to the workplace. And now you can step into that power with confidence because you understand what you bring. You may not do all these other 47 things, and that's fine. There's other people that are masters at those things. But figure out who you are. And by doing this self-assessment, analysis, asking yourself questions, for lots of years, I really strove to be someone that I was not. And I was remarkably good at failing at it. And it wasn't good for the organization. And it didn't bring out my strengths. So instead, go to where you're strong, amplify those, surround yourself with those folks that are capable in all these other areas, and then move out and go change the world.
I'm glad you took that answer in that direction. I have this eternal belief in sort of understanding where your strengths are, where your gaps are, and then fully embracing, quite frankly, what your limitations are. Because I think that kind of awareness actually allows you to go out and find the people who complement you, especially as you're trying to accomplish like big things. Like you can't expect to do it all on your own. Even with this business that I've started with Apogee, like I understand that there's a ton of stuff that I'm just not good at. So I've had to find those people that have those complementary skills and who are great at those things, and try and enlist them in this effort. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of the freedom, I think, that comes from that kind of self-awareness?
I would submit it's the freedom to be truly who you are. Because if I take this example of me, and while I had a technical background, if I'm trying to be the full-on engineer and I'm surrounded by other people who have the degrees and I'm putting myself in that position, I'm weakening everyone. And it's far better to celebrate, give them the power, lean on them fully for who they are, than that gives me the freedom to be good at the things that I'm bringing to the table. I had heard this former boss, Matt Severson, lots of respect for him. He kept telling me, he's like, in the role that I'm in, he's like, you are supposed to be the conductor. If you are playing an instrument, that's a problem.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. So I'm like, if I'm supposed to be the conductor as the project manager and I'm over here playing the tuba, what is that? Who's leading? It's, and it doesn't mean that because I'm conducting, I'm any better than the tuba player. No, we're all doing a particular role in this particular project. So for me, once I gave myself permission to not try to be something that I was not because of expectations that I heard when I was young about this or that kind of job or any of these just things that get tacked on, then it became, let me excel in this and then go forward. And as a result, we did some amazing work once I kind of got out of my own way and allowed other folks to thrive. So it was beautiful.
So you're touching on a theme that's come up in the past couple of conversations that I've had with folks. Some of it intentional, but sometimes it shows up organically like this. Because I have spent the last decade in the technology space, even during my time in the FBI. And one of the challenges I see in the industry are folks relying way too heavily on their individual technical skill set and assuming that that's going to get them every place that they want to be in the organization, whilst ignoring some of these other things that are typically called soft skills, their ability to communicate, their ability to lead, all of these other things that are kind of intangibles that allow people to stand out. And it's interesting that even though you come from an engineering background, you recognize that there's probably in any one particular room, and this is certainly something I recognize having been in the tech space now for the past decade, there's going to be people in the room who know a whole lot more than I do about the technology. I mean, I seed that ground almost immediately. What I don't seed when I go into a room is the leadership experience and the other skills that I know I bring to the table. So I'm all ears when it comes to the technical piece that I am sure other people are going to be in a position to offer. And I think it's that ability to recognize that gap that allows us to build really effective teams. The best experiences I've had professionally have been ones where you can kind of handpick team members and bring them in because of a particular skill set that they have, understanding that every one piece is integral to the ultimate outcome. Because of a particular strength that they have, and it's not because they're a master of all domains. That's not what a conductor in this particular case is needed. If I'm a conductor of an orchestra, I want the best flautist, I want the best tuba player, I want and then it's up to me to figure out how to get them to all be on the same pace, volume, and rhythm as it relates to extracting that skill set. So just really an interesting, I think, piece to extrapolate off of how you responded to that.
Yeah, I would submit connecting that if you are the expert in all things, then you're a one-man band. You may have other people playing around you, whatever, but that means that you're going to be a choke point. You're going to limit your growth, and you can never play the music of an orchestra if you're a one-man band. You just can't. So you're limiting your own growth.
Talk to me about the coaching industry. Where do you see it going? Does technology play a role in coaching? I mean, it sounds like what you're doing is a little bit very, very sort of engrossed in a particular aspect of coaching. How do you see things changing in terms of the industry? What's your prognostication about whether or not this industry is going to grow and its value to people, that kind of thing?
I would say that it's going to grow. So very up close and personal on this is what I'm doing with Finding Good is we use AI as a companion. So a part of this is that when we're working together, it's a going in on a daily basis, just filling out or answering some questions anyway, such that now at the end of the week, there's a summary, and this will have given you questions as you've gone through. Now, when we get to our time to talk, now we don't need to spend the first 20 minutes finding out how things are going. Because now, bam, we've got this. And we see how it's been working for you throughout that week. And now we can talk specifically about it. So that, to me, I think that is only going to expand in the industry. If it doesn't, then okay, you can kind of go with the longer way of having to not use the time as effectively. Good on you if that's what you're going to do. But I think between that and as folks adopt AI, I think that there's going to be an element of using AI as a coach. You know, if we look at AI becoming that true companion walking through life, and you know, you're always asking it and just talking to it, there'd be a component of it that would be able to help out in some of these areas. Because if you look 20 years down the line, this is going to we'll have figured out a bunch of this stuff. But I would say that yes, it's going to continue to merge, and then the role of the coach is able to still be that outside voice that comes in and provides clarity for the lived experience.
Yeah, I mean, that I think you're right on point there. I would be one to plus one in your theory there that it's going to play, I think, an ever more important role in terms of how people use it. But I notice, and I'm grateful that you did this. I noticed that you didn't use the word, but it's a tool. It's not meant to be the full answer to something. Right. It's meant to be an assist, a tool to help you get to a point of maximizing or optimizing the information that it might supply. And I think people get wrapped around the axle around the replacement theory of AI and its capabilities rather than a tool to help you be more productive, to be more efficient, to be optimized in terms of your evolution as a person. And I totally agree with that 100%.
I think what AI is going to offer us is the ability to become more human, because if it takes off some of the burden of some of the other elements of the things that we need to concentrate on just to live life, and we can offload some of that to AI, then I think that we are going to get to a healthier place where now if it's something that you can, because if it's noticing things about how you're going about doing your day, or because it's just going to be more, it's going to gather more and more data from us. And if it's able to pick up on, hey, doesn't seem like your sleep is getting any better. What's going on with that? And kind of offload some of these data points that we're not tracking on a daily basis. And it's able to look at some of these bigger themes. I think that's just going to make us healthier going forward, as long as we choose to listen to it.
Yeah. You got me re-excited about it. I maintain a level of excitement about artificial intelligence, but that's I think you're absolutely right on where this is headed. Tell us what you're working on. You got any books in flight? Anything that you're working on long term that will sort of help to consolidate your theories or what your experiences have been?
I keep getting peppered on the book on a couple different fronts. Happened, a couple times last week. I'll say that's a slow burn.
Yeah.
And part of that is I want to, on this particular topic, in the world of questions and how this is coming about, I do want to gather a bit more. I want to walk a few more miles on this one as I pull that together. There's certainly some elements of some of the other projects that I've done that are book worthy at the moment, and we'll see how all of that gets merged. But otherwise, it's as of last month in March is when I made the transition from government employee to shifting to doing curated questions full time. And so right in the near term here, this is really what I'm focusing on and building out all the different elements that really engaging with questions has ahead of us.
Yeah. So I think we probably only touched on the tip of the iceberg as it relates to the subject. I do think that it's a super interesting path that you've decided to pursue. I do believe that there's a lot of value. Where can folks find the Curated Questions website? Like if you want to point them towards that, and also where can they find your podcast?
Yeah. So the good news is by coming up with the name Curated Questions, it's not the same name as like Jeff Bezos that everybody else wants the URL. So I own Curated Questions across the ecosystem. So it's www.curatedquestions.com. That's where the podcast is also at, all the questions, but also the podcast is out wherever you find your favorite podcast. And just dropped a new episode yesterday. So at this point, they've been coming out bi-weekly. And going forward here, probably in May, I'm going to be shifting to a weekly format and alternating between solo episodes, which an example of that was an impactful question with Ronald Reagan when he asked the question, are you better off 4 years ago, or are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, and how that question has become perennial in the conversation on politics. So that's an example of what some of those solo conversations would be like. And then otherwise it would be an interview format. And like this week, I just spoke with Kevin Kelly of Wired fame and Silicon Valley Maverick. So been able to punch above my weight because this is an interesting topic.
Ken, I think that you're venturing in the territory that very few have gone down, and I think you've sort of nailed a lane for yourself. So we're looking forward to seeing what happens. I'm always a fan of amplifying other people's efforts, certainly in the podcasting realm, and I would encourage my listeners to come find you at the Curated Questions website and also to find the podcast. So we're looking forward to hearing more from you.
It's a joy. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I also just get to know you and to talk with you a little bit more about this. So always a good conversation. Thank you for having me here.
All right. Outstanding. All right, folks, that's it for this episode of Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. If you're ready to elevate your personal leadership and drive your team's success, connect with Apogee Global RMS for custom coaching and development solutions. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of impactful personal leadership strategies. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and empowering those around you. Together, we'll amplify your success